Good morning, second graders. This is our agenda for math today. We will start with sprints to warm up our math brains. We'll have a whole group discussion about this video, and then we will jump into stations and do some activities together. And then we'll come back as a group and we will talk about what we discovered. Now, our learning targets today are measuring objects using non-standard units, and we'll talk about what that means. We will use uniform objects over and over to measure items around the room and each other. I want you to think for a second first about what you already know about measurement. I want you to think about these things for a few minutes, and then we will talk about what that means. Now, you probably answered with 140 pounds or 120 pounds. I'm sure all of you answered with a number and then the word pounds, because that is the standard unit of how we measure weight, right? We all know that. We all accept it. The standard form is what's considered normal. So we all know it's normal to talk about our weight in pounds. That's what standard means. Now, how tall is Mrs. Gifford? You might have an answer like 5 feet, 4'7", 5'5", and you know this because you've heard people talk about the standard unit in height. We've talked about that before. You've heard it over and over. So that's what's normal is feet, right? So standard means accepted. It's the normal. It's the standard. We all kind of know it, right? So now I want you to think about things that you have measured before. I want you to think about the tools that you've used to measure those things. Think about the kitchen. Think about if you've sewn or you have used yarn or maybe an art class. Think about things that we measure and how we measure those things. So a lot of you probably thought about feet, thought about miles. You may have even thought about time. We measure things all the time. How long until lunch? 20 minutes. How long until recess? An hour. You ask that all the time. So we're measuring time all day long. You have probably talked about inches before. You may have measured things. I know we've measured things in math. You know what inches are. And standard also means it's the same all the time, right? Everyone knows what an inch is, and an inch is the same all the time. It doesn't change, right? Feet, it's the same thing. We measure people's height in feet. We measure different things in feet. If you think about maybe in the kitchen, what do you measure in the kitchen and how do you measure those things? Those are all standard, okay? Now today we're going to start using non-standard units. So a unit is an inch, that's a unit. A foot, that is a unit. So if I'm 5 feet, I am 5 rulers, right? I'm 5 rulers long. So this foot is 1 unit. That is the unit we're using to measure, right? So 60 seconds is 1 minute. So 1 second is the unit that we're using. When we get into non-standard units of measurement, it means you could use anything to measure. It's non-standard because it's not accepted. It's not normal. We don't normally measure things with starburst. We don't normally measure things with paper clips, right? So it's not accepted by everybody. But you can use it to measure things, and we're going to do that today. But just as you would use standard units of measurement to measure something, there are a couple rules you have to follow when using non-standard units. So I have to have end points. So this line This imaginary line that I'm measuring has to have 2 endpoints, and that's where I start measuring and I stop measuring. I'm not going to stop measuring right here because that's not the end point, okay? You also have to have the uniform or the same unit repeated. So the uniform means the same. So I can't use 3 paper clips and then 1 big Post-it. The unit has to be the same. The 1 paper clip is used over and over and over, just like an inch would be used over and over and over to measure something, okay? So uniform means the same, and you are using the same unit over and over and over, okay? You're not going to have any spaces. You're not going to have any overlaps. And I'll show you that a little bit later too when we practice. So when we measure things, today especially, we are definitely going to estimate. So it's not going to be exact. When something's not exact, it's not perfect. So if you look at this end point to the bunny ear, and let's say you made a line and you went droop, it doesn't go straight to the top, right? There's a little bit of space there. So we're going to use the term about. It's not exact. It's about 4 blocks tall. Okay, we can do that. So estimating is not exact. So when you're measuring your friends, you can use Post-it notes, you can use markers, you can use blocks. We have a couple different items today, and you will choose 2, I think, out of the 5. So you'll have some choice, but you will take turns measuring your friend with 2 different non-standard units, and then your friend will measure you with 2 different non-standard units of measurement, and you'll graph those, okay? So when you measure, you're going to pick 1 non-standard unit only at a time. So if you pick blocks, they all have to be blocks. Your partner's going to lay on the floor, and you will line up your non-standard unit of measurement next to them. You'll make sure they're in a straight line. You won't have any spaces. You won't have any overlaps, meaning like these are laying on top of each other. You have to have them end to end to end, okay? And you have to use the one thing, the one standard unit, non-standard unit, over and over and over, from one end to the other end point. Now when we measure, this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going past my end point, but if you look, it's more than half. So if we took this block away, I would say it's closer to 7 than 6. Because if you look at this, he's longer than half of this block. So he is closer to 7 than 6. So to be a little more accurate, we're going to take our non-standard unit and we're going to at least go to the end point. Okay? Now, if let's say we measured and all these were not overlapped and it was this close, you're just going to count what you have here. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we will come back and we'll talk about what we found out. So today you will need a pencil, you will need your sprints, a partner, I will give you a measuring chart, and you need a smile and your best effort. See you later.